Now that we know how to design a good experiment, in this section we're going to talk about the scope of inference that's appropriate based on how the experiment has been designed and whether a statistical study has been carried out in an ethical manner. This part right here is not going to be tested on the AP test, but it's really important that we understand what is the right thing to do when it comes to studies. Okay, there's two kinds of inferences we can make when we're looking at observational studies or experiments. And those inferences have to do with, can we talk about this, the sample that we have taken and make an inference about the population? And the other question is, can we make an inference about cause and effect? And this little chart right here helps us to understand that. So this part has to do with, were the individuals randomly selected from the population? And if they were randomly selected from the population, then we can go ahead and make some inferences about the entire population. Only when they were randomly selected from the population can we do that. Otherwise, the sample can only talk about the sample. So that's when we have sample surveys. We do a good job of randomly selecting with a simple random sample, with a stratified sample, with cluster sampling, where we're talking about everyone in that population has the same chance of being chosen. If that's so, then we can make inferences about the population. The next thing we're going to look at is, were the individuals who were in the either the observational study or the experiment, were they randomly assigned to groups? And if they were randomly assigned to groups, then we can infer cause and effect, because that randomization allows us to even out the groups and mitigate some of the factors, the confounding variables that might get in the way of us being able to infer cause and effect. So the only time we can infer cause and effect is when individuals are randomly assigned to groups, and of course we also have to have controls and all that kind of stuff. But this is a good way of looking at it, and go ahead and read this stuff as well. So pretty much, you want to if someone says, can we imply causation, you want to say no, unless the following things are involved. You're gonna have to know that there's an explanatory variable that changes the response variable. It has to be statistically significant. You have to have randomization. You have to have a comparison. You have to make sure that all of the other variables that could possibly confound are as controlled as possible. And then all of those things are involved, then you can imply causation. However, if any one of those things are missing, you can talk about a strong association, but you cannot infer causation. So err on the side of no if you're not really sure. Lack of realism is just a tiny component of, sometimes there's a really strong experiment that comes out with a very strong conclusion of cause and effect. However, it can't really be put into a practical application. There's a study in a book that talks about, before there was a third brake light in cars, the study was very strongly showing that having that third brake light really improved the safety of the vehicle and the ability of people to react when they needed to brake. However, once all cars were manufactured with that third brake light, that effect no longer occurred, because it was just another feature of all the cars, and so did not really create an opportunity for people to be more aware. So sometimes great experiments don't actually lend to great practical applications. Sometimes it's not practical or ethical to do an experiment. We've talked about these. You can't really prove that smoking causes ADD or any of those other things, because we can't ethically make half the people smoke and the other people not smoke. And there's not enough ways to control control all the confounding variables to allow us to really make a cause and effect relationship. There are some things, however, that have had so many observational studies that connect them that even though, like for smoking and lung cancer, there's very, very strong evidence that smoking and lung cancer are associated with one very strong evidence. However, it's possible, of course, that there's a genetic predisposition to nicotine addiction, which could create also lung cancer. It's a possibility that there's other things that lifestyle of people that smoke tend to drink more and exercise less and all those things. However, there's been so many studies that kind of controlled for those variables, even though they were observational, that there are some cause and effect that scientists feel comfortable making when it's that many replicated observational studies. So since it's unethical to create some experiments that would allow us to imply causation, there are following criteria that we can look at with observational studies. But it's, once again, a very rare, and it has to be very strong. So our association has to be strong, our R has to be close to 1 or -1. The association is consistent, it happens in all ways that it's been looked at. Larger values of the explanatory variable are associated with strong responses. The cause obviously has to precede the effect in time, and so the explanatory variable has to precede the effect in time, and then the cause has to be a plausible cause. It's not just going to be some weird association that people are finding. Last piece that I'm going to talk about is not covered on the AP test, which is data ethics. But whenever you're collecting data from people, you have to consider their safety and their well-being. And so there are institutional review boards before any large observational study or small observational study or experiment is done to protect the safety and the well-being of the subjects. That needs to be part of the design of the sample survey or of the experimental design. All individuals who are subjects in a study must give their informed consent. They need to understand enough of the design of the study to understand the treatments that they might be undertaking so they can consent to those. Of course, they won't know if they're going to have that treatment or that treatment. That's part of it, but they have to be aware of what the treatments might be so they can consent to that. And then all individual data must be kept confidential. Normally, individuals are numbered or given a code. So once that information is published, then there are no actual names involved, or their aliases. So once again, this is the part that you will be tested on, so make sure you understand when you can make an inference about the population from the sample and when you can make an inference of cause and effect. So go back and look at that chart so you've got it memorized.